Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, the Attorney General of the state, Kathleen Kane, takes on Governor Wolf's death penalty moratorium, and then will the Chief of Staff to the governor of this state run for the United States Senate? All of that and more following these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Welcome back to the program. Well, joining me, as often is the case, is Brad Bumsted. He's a journalist with the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review, and John Micek. He's the Editorial Page Editor of the Patriot News /PennLive. Do I got that right?
Yes, you do.
/PennLive. And Dave Patti from the Pennsylvania Business Council will join me. We're going into the budget and business taxes. But first, a couple of big news stories of this week. I'm going to start with Brad Bumsted, Kathleen Kane, the Attorney General. This is pretty rare. She's mostly been in agreement with Governor Wolf, says no to the moratorium on the death penalty. She's going to court and say the governor doesn't have the... What's the story here?
Well, it's on constitutional grounds, challenging Wolf, saying that he does not have the authority. He's overstepped his bounds by doing a moratorium on the death penalty. It's not against the death penalty. It's not for the death penalty per se. So it's interesting, and it mirrors a motion filed by Philadelphia District Attorney Seth Williams, who actually had given Kane a lot of problems with the legislative sting case, the bribery case, in prosecuting people that she wouldn't prosecute. So they wind up being sort of allies on this motion against Wolf.
Yeah. I want to come back to you on a related matter, but John, look, you've covered a lot of these cases, and here we have a lady elected to the post of Attorney General, the first Democrat, the first woman. It looked like people were talking about the U.S. Senate, the governor's right, everything. I heard somebody say maybe the vice presidency after the first year, very popular, and then it all just seems to have gone, quickly downhill. Beleaguered, she could end up being prosecuted for leaking a testimony in a grand jury and then lying when she appeared before that grand jury. The Attorney General, or the District Attorney of Montgomery County, Risa Furman, is considering that. This is substantial news, isn't it?
You sure you need me for anything else? You've pretty adequately summed up what Attorney General Kane is facing right now, Terry. But I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, she's under a cloud. She's had bad headline after bad headline after bad headline. Here's a bright spot of news. This is something that people, crime victims love this, cops love this, DAs love this. They've all complained about the Wolf death penalty moratorium. It's something where she's taken a strong stand. This isn't going to exactly reverse her ship by any means, but it's a momentary respite from getting hammered in the headlines, at least.
Yeah, I think you're right. Now, Brad Bumsted has written a book, Keystone Corruption. I'll hold it up. He gets into the details of Pennsylvania's sort of more sordid past. Brad, we don't know what will happen yet to the Attorney General. We're waiting. But this is just the last of a series of public corruption charges. This is a little more than public corruption, involving a score of important state officers over 40 years, right? Right.
And this tracks 100 years of corruption, starting after the Civil War. But if you look at it, it's been cyclical. We'll go through periods like the Schaap administration where there was a lot of corruption, and this most recent period where 8 legislative leaders were in prison at the same time. So when I finished writing that book, I thought it was over, that we would have a respite from this, but we haven't. There have been numerous other cases, including Treasurer Rob McCord pleading guilty to extortion, and now the Attorney General, the other ranking Democrat independent office holder, under criminal investigation. She could be cleared, but this is a serious investigation by Risa Furman that's looking at a lot more than just perjury and some of the things identified in a statewide grand jury. And we know that how? Because there have been search warrants served twice for emails, we believe, in the Attorney General's office.
So, John, before we turn to Katie McGinty, so everybody is waiting now to see what the DA does. Sort of the consensus in Harrisburg, at least from folks who are not directly involved, but some of the Fourth Estate, you reported, seem to think July, given the fact that She's running the Montgomery County DA for judge. Is that is that reasonable?
We've gone to DEFCON 5 a couple of times in the last couple of weeks here, where we thought, oh my God, today's the day. This is where Risa Furman's going to finally lead her off in shackles, only to have that not happen. So everyone's been kind of like poised like greyhounds, waiting to see what Ms. Furman is going to do, and certainly because she's running for judge, that lends some urgency to it.
And plus another, I don't think she wants to go, back into the fall. No. This is Risa Furman. She's running for judge with this whole thing. We're going to run to a break, and we come back. Pretty, as they say, breaking news last week. I want to ask John Micek. I'll start with him. A very unusual situation. The chief of staff of a governor of this state as a possible U.S. Senate candidate. We'll take that up following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Welcome back. Two of the state's leading journalists are joining me this week. Brad Bumsted with the Tribune-Review and John Micek. He's the editorial page editor of the Patriot News PennLive. All right, John, you and Brad have been around this block with candidates for a long time. The chief of staff to the governor now is solicited to run quite the right way for the U.S. Senate. Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, this whole thing with Katie McGinty, the governor's chief of staff, being potentially approached about a Senate bid, we should stress she's not made up her mind. Right. There's no candidate. I mean, it comes out of this very bizarre situation in Allentown, my old stomping grounds. I was a reporter for the Morning Call for many years, where federal agents served warrants at City Hall. 2 weeks ago now. Some very excellent reporting by my friends Scott Krause and Emily Apillo leading to this. It resulted in the mayor at Pulaski suspending his Democratic Senate campaign.
He was the other Democratic candidate.
Challenging Joe Sestak for the Democratic nomination. His campaign consultant, Mike Fleck, very abruptly closing up shop. Democrats for weeks and months now have been casting about for an alternative to Joe Sestak, who narrowly lost, Terry, you'll recall, to Republican Pat Toomey in 2010. They don't think that he can beat Toomey in a rematch. The Montgomery County Commissioner Josh Shapiro had been broached about a bid. In fact, no. Chuck Schumer and John Tester from the U.S. Senate had approached him about it and leaned on him heavily, and he said no. So it looked like we were saddled, or Democrats looked like they were saddled with either Pulaski or Sestak. Pulaski calls time on his campaign, and all of a sudden, Katie McGinty's name bubbles up. There's even a draft McGinty Twitter account now.
I mean, you've covered lots of governors over your career. The chief of staff?
Yeah, but she's not just a chief. She was a gubernatorial candidate and ran in the Democratic primary.
Yeah, that's unusual to have a person you ran become chief of staff.
So it's not like she's just a chief of staff who was an internal bureaucrat or something. She ran a credible race for governor. She didn't have any money, but she performed well, and Wolf really liked her, and that's why he brought her on board.
To be honest, I mean, we all covered that. She lost the race. There were 4 people in the Democratic primary, ultimately won by Governor Wolf. And I'm being objective about this. I thought she came out of the race with enhanced credibility. John, am I right about that?
I mean, in a weird way, she actually kind of won that primary, because we say, well, look at what happened to Rob McCord and Allison Hu, but you have John Hanger, one brief candidate in the administration now, and Katie McGinty, during the general election campaign, went on to run the sort of parallel universe Democratic State Committee that Wolf had set up, and now she was just chief of staff. Yeah.
All right, John. Something really unusual. Commercials in the budget, dealing with the budget, right?
Yeah, the Democratic Governors Association, or rather America Works USA, it's kind of labor-funded PAC wing, last week launched a $500,000 statewide ad buy to hammer Republicans and to call on them to come around on Governor Wolf's budget priorities. I mean, this is pretty extraordinary. There's an influx of third-party money in this budget fight from the DJA on the left, from Americans' Prosperity on the right. It's become a real sort of battle for hearts and minds in a way we've not seen before.
I know.
And for the first time ever that I've seen, a wealthy state senator, Scott Wagner from York, has created a PAC, and he's running. That PAC is running its own ads against Wolf's budget. So you have a senator as well as these PACs. But by the time your viewers see this show, Wolf will have made a decision about the pension bill, and that will go a long way to determining how long this goes on.
And I want to quickly point out, we still do not know as of yet the fate of Kathleen Kane, and as we tape this show, something could happen that could change this discussion. But both of you believe that decision could come at any time. Start with you, yes or no on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Could come at any time?
Very soon.
All right, we're out of time in this segment, but Keystone Corruption, a Pennsylvania insider's view of state government going wrong by Brad Bumsted, the executive producer, says, where can we get it?
Yeah, well, you can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble websites, or bradbumsted.com. And there's a great prologue in there, too, by Dr. Madonna.
And when John Micek writes his book, he's coming on.
He really got to write me a book now.
He promised me he's coming on. All right, we're going to get into the business, the budget a little bit. We stayed away from that on this segment with Dave Patti from the PA Business Council. We'll be back.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania, and by the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance, representing companies involved in America's most affordable, reliable energy source. To learn more, visit pacoalalliance.com.
Well, Dave Patti, he's the head of Pennsylvania Business Council. He's president and CEO, joins me as often in the case for his take on a whole variety of important subjects. Dave, we talked, hold on, I have to say this. We did not coordinate these colors. Everybody's going to ask why we all have. It seems like that's the color of the day, right? We got a little
This was a gift from my son.
Well, good. Good for Father's Day, I hope? Yeah, we're good. Well, we're almost all in the same color combination here. All right. Fair Education Commission says we need to find a new way to get a formula. We talked about that before. Everybody loves it. At least I haven't heard any opposition.
Right.
But the big battle is, do we use it in this year's budget, or do we postpone it for a year?
Well, what Governor
first of all, why is that important?
Yeah, what Governor Wolf and others have suggested, what the governor would like to do, is what he calls restore, and restoration being a reference to those who say that the Corbett administration cut funding. But we all know that stimulus money went away. What they would like to do is put money in, not using the formula this year, about $410 million would be his preference, or more, into predominantly urban schools. Everybody would get some, but urban schools would get more because that's where people feel the cuts manifested themselves the most. Others, Senator Smucker, who was with me a couple of weeks ago, myself, our organization, and others, say, well, if you don't use the formula we just created, somebody in the next year will think, oh, I can do better, and they'll start tinkering with it. So there's a possible compromise of you run some money through the formula so it's in statute now and gets locked in, and do some of what the government wants to do. I don't think that's a stumbling block for the.
All right. So to recap this, in this year's budget, the governor says, I want about $410 million. I want to decide how it gets spent. Right. Is that basically right?
I mean, he'll say he's using a previous formula. We didn't really have a formula, but a previous system in which larger percentage amounts of funds go to largely urban schools.
Okay.
Or very rural schools. But
right. So then under the formula, the urban schools wouldn't get as much as the governor would give them this year. Is that fair?
Correct. This year they would get a little bit less. They still do better than, say, suburban schools,
right,
even in the formula because of the demographics. But what the formula would happen in the governor's proposal is it would raise the baseline for when the formula kicks in.
Right. So the bottom line here, before we move on, is that we're going to have a formula, it looks like. The question is whether it's this year. But this is actually a pretty big deal to schools, isn't it?
It's a big deal to schools, and I think it's a big deal to those who are advocating for a formula. But I also think, this is one of those, I will say rare, well, I don't want to say rare cases.
I know.
But actually, there's a good public policy argument on both sides of this discussion.
Yeah.
So this is not pure politics.
I got it.
This is a public policy discussion, and I think that there is a compromise that can be had.
And those differences are often better than some of the differences you observe, right?
Yeah, but this is not ideological.
Yeah, good.
This is substantive.
Okay, that's good. All right, now let's look. I don't know how many more programs we can do on the failure to do a budget because there's no big news out of the budget except the rhetoric is ratcheted up. And now you've covered, again, a lot of these. It's not totally uncommon, is it? Or is this a little tougher?
I mean, what has changed over the years, with my, I don't know, this is maybe my 32nd budget, is social media and the access to sort of, taking it to the issue advertising level. Right. So the governor has, through the National Democratic Governors Association and others, and through his own personal money that he's put into essentially a political action committee, he's doing direct mailers, or his allies are doing direct mailers into people's districts. You're doing TV commercials. So that takes the rhetoric to a new level.
Yeah, now, let me stop you. I've not seen this level where they're directly going to the voters by these other means of communication. Is that?
It started in some other states. I mean,
yeah, but I mean here. Have you seen that
this is
before?
relatively new to Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Certainly interest groups, whether it be a labor group, a business group, trial lawyers, civil justice people, have done issue advertising before. But on a budget overall, this is relatively new.
Yeah, I think so.
And advocating for particular taxes.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's run to a break. When we come back, I want to ask you to discuss some possible compromises. I mean, it's all both sides. Would you agree? Both sides have to give up something. We're not getting it resolved without it, are we?
Yes, but I would even phrase it that both sides can win some things.
I like that. I'm talking with Dave Patti. We'll be back.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Business Council and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation.
I'm talking with Dave Patti from the Pennsylvania Business Council, and we're going to move from education to the overall budget situation. Governor Wolf has vetoed the budget in its entirety. He has vetoed the liquor privatization bill. As we tape this program, we still do not know whether he has vetoed the pension bill, but he has to make that decision by the time this program airs. All right, we've got these big differences. I like the way you put that. I've not heard that. A win-win or somewhat.
Yeah, I think everybody can. I mean, I think there's the possibility of a deal where everybody could go away happy. And all parties have to give up some of the rhetoric, but also if they just start to understand that the general public doesn't understand the details, doesn't care about the details, doesn't want to know about the details. So if the governor would be willing to accept, let's say, beer and wine in grocery stores and convenience stores, and if the House Republicans particularly would be willing to view that as a win, I would guess that 99% of the population would view that as huge.
Yeah. So in other words, we'd keep the liquor store operation. The wholesale would remain under state control, but they would do licenses In other words,
Right. And I'm not necessarily advocating. I'm just saying.
No, I understand.
But something like
I understand.
that, you know.
Modernization.
Right.
Is that the word where it applies?
Yeah. Well, modernization is now a code word for some other things, but
I understand.
But yeah, I mean, to use that in the normal sense of the word modernization, yeah, or I would actually say normalization.
Normalization.
You know, since that's the way the rest of the world works.
And that the Senate Republicans leaders in the past had more leaned towards that. Had leaned towards that, and the governor, you think, would sign.
Well, I'm
that.
just saying. Well, no, I'm not saying that, but I would say that if he does that, if he does some pension reform for public employees,
right.
you know, maybe I think SB 1's pretty fair to everybody. It's only new employees. I think it's good public policy. Maybe he wants to have a little tweak there. You know, maybe he, ends up vetoing it. I would like to see him sign it, but if he vetoes it later this week, and then says, but you know what? If you just take this out, or if you just add that in, I could be for that. And then I think there are possibilities.
So hold on, before you go on,
Sure.
we'll get
because this all has to balance, just as
I
he says.
understand. So you got a pension bill, new employees, 401k style plan, period, end of quote. Possible hybrid, maybe up to 50,000. The employees stay in defined benefit.
Right.
Above 50,000. I mean, I don't know what that all does to the pension.
Or what's called a cash balance system, where essentially you have a cash balance that you could take. What frankly helps an employee in that situation is the true defined benefit system is great if you're going to stay 30 years.
Right.
Most people don't stay in a job 30 years anymore. So you have nothing to take with you if you leave in 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. So frankly, some of these other systems would help make it a more portable system, even for the lower salaried person. So there are some tweaks that can be very good for new employees, preserve everything for existing employees, help the state down the road. Won't be instantaneous, but down the road, save $10 billion, $12 billion.
I mean, that's the big debate.
Right.
The state has, and I'll just push it, $60 billion in pension debt. And none of the plans, either the governor's plan actually or the Republican plan, really in the short run reduce the debt. Do you agree with that?
You can't. The debt's the debt. I mean, you're going to owe that much money when these people retire, period.
And then we can argue in the long run on the two sides. All right, let's go to the issue.
I think the point, for a lot of people is we don't want to keep digging that hole deeper.
Okay. Yeah. Let's go to the budget. The governor has said, I want education funding increase. He's proposed a total of $1 billion. About $410 million would go directly to the schools in what we call their subsidy.
The basic education fund.
That's right. $100 million in the Republican plan. The governor wants a shale tax. Let me throw this one out. The governor gets $300 million into school subsidy, and instead of a 5% shale tax, maybe a 2.5%. Is that?
Well, I think when you look at what Republican leaders have said, certainly Senator Corman, the majority leader of the Senate, has said the only thing that's off the table for he and his members is a personal income tax increase and a sales tax increase. So that suggests that everything else, including shale, would be on the table.
And it also
for
suggests that they couldn't do property tax reform right now.
Yeah, the Senate hasn't shown a strong interest in property tax, and I will tell you that the business communities never thought it was a real public policy issue. Certainly, it's a political problem for some people, but I don't think that it rises to the crisis it's made out to be. In fact, there's a lot of strengths to that tax as taxes go. But I think there is a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit over here that you could cobble together another $1 billion in revenue.
Yeah.
The Republican passed budget does not include, but everybody thinks phase 2 will include something on a gross receipts tax on insurance, a bank shares tax, maybe a little Marcellus. That could put together a package.
Thanks for coming in.
Yep.
Good update. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well.